The Grinch became a pulp cultural icon back in 1957 when his book, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, first came out. And even more so in 1966 when his Christmas special came out, starring Boris Karloff, the horror icon of the 1930s. And still an icon. And in a surprising twist of fate, back in the year 2000, we had gotten a perfect live-action retelling of the Grinch. Not only did it retell bits that we already know, but it further elevated and further elaborated certain things of the story of the Grinch, adding details and fleshing out as to why the Grinch would want to steal Christmas in really creative and fun ways, unlike The Mean One, the Grinch horror movie that came out back in 2022 that apparently was released in theaters but very limited. It was not released in any theater in my home city, to the point where my girlfriend actually questioned if the movie even existed or if it was just a joke. I mean, yeah, it kind of seemed that way from the trailers themselves, but still, I knew this movie existed, and it took some time, but eventually it got released on Blu-ray at least a year after its initial release. And I fucking hate this movie. I find it funny how a non-Hollywood movie somehow made an even more corporate film than Hollywood, especially when I've seen the crap that Sony has come up with. I think what's really disappointing is the idea of having a Grinch horror movie sounds a lot of fun, especially it being a slasher movie. And it just felt like they came up with the idea in one quick afternoon. They came out with the script and they were like, Grinch horror movie, that's it. And they just kind of like waved their hand and just like, they called it a day. Well, like, there's so many things you could have done with a Grinch horror movie, and they just sat on their hands thinking the money would just come flowing in. What is this, some kind of Ponzi scheme? Or should I say a laundering scheme? Are they selling drugs or something? I don't even understand. Okay, fine, yeah, the movie has terrible acting, terrible dialogue. We'll talk about those too, but the least they could have done was made a fun slasher movie. But all they did was, there's so much shaky cam and quick editing and cutting. I'm like, you're making a horror movie and you're not allowing us to see the violence, the blood, the splatter. You're making a Grinch horror movie. Do you like slasher films? Do you like horror movies? Like, why do you keep cutting away and quickly, like, just condensing the rampage of the Grinch? I'll talk about the story in a minute, but I'd rather talk about the tactical aspects of this stupid fucking piece of shit. It is incredibly lazy. The color grading is so ugly. Some scenes are underexposed, and some of them are underexposed for no reason. You're outside. Why don't you let the sun fucking light your fucking movie? Why is it so dark? It looks like they're trying to film day for night, but you can tell that she's supposed to be hiking during the daytime. So, like, why does it look this way? Well, we should talk about the quote-unquote plot, if there was one. The movie starts out with a narration detailing about the night when Cindy, as a child, met the Mean One. I'm not gonna call him that, I'm just gonna call him the Grinch. I should point out that her full name is Cindy You-Know-Who. I'll give the movie this. For better or worse, it did try to be punny, and that's where I felt they mostly gave two shits about, more than anything else. On top of Easter eggs and references to not only the Grinch story, but also to other Dr. Seuss's works. On a side note, I actually kind of liked the narration. I felt the rhyming was kind of fun and creative. Next to the Grinch's design, I really love the makeup. I like how it stands out and sets itself apart from the live-action Jim Carrey makeup. I really love that. It looks really cool and menacing, and I really like all the details, even in the Santa costume that the Grinch wears. And I'll talk about David Howard Thornton's performance, as I really enjoyed it, but I'll talk about that later. But as expected, the story takes a dark turn when Sydney's mom shows up to beat the living crap out of the Grinch. And this altercation leads to an accidental murder, as the Grinch just pushes the woman off, and she falls on the... What the fuck is that? Why is there a needle? Like, I don't understand how this world works, honestly. Like why am I stupid? Have I not been around nutcrackers enough? Like, why does it have like this like convenient needle, like this like sharp object like in the right arm to where the mother just falls on it? And did I mention earlier that the editing was just super atrocious? Also, like, I don't want to harp on a little girl, but
why, Santa Claus? Why? Mommy, no!
I'll just leave it at that. So because of this accidental death and Cindy calling the Grinch a monster, losing her love, the Grinch, I guess, breaks and then starts killing people all throughout the years. Although there's an unconventional subplot that almost contradicts this whole thing and is super pointless, and I'll get into that later. But I don't like this whole idea that the Grinch accidentally kills somebody and then just starts going on a killing spree. To me, that's not enough of a motive. It would have been different if he actually, like, in self-defense, murders Cindy's mom and then gets a taste for blood. Like, that's fun. Like, from a horror movie fan's perspective, that's more interesting and more enticing than like, oh, he accidentally killed someone. But it's like, it wasn't his fault. If anything, it would have made more sense if he just stayed in hiding. Because Cindy called him a monster, he should have just isolated himself out of shame. That makes more sense to me. But him murdering on purpose of Cindy's mom, having that lust for blood, makes more sense for a horror movie and makes it more scary. Also, the movie never really gets into why the Grinch hates Christmas. Yeah, sure, the original source material never gets into why the Grinch hated Christmas in the first place, but when you're having an adaptation or a unique spin to a beloved story, especially when it's a horror movie, you don't want to do anything fun. Like, you could say that maybe he was abandoned by his parents, and that when he sees families together during Christmas, it just reminds him of the love that he never had. So him wanting to steal Christmas in the first place was taking away and make everyone as bitter as he was. Or in a unique way, by stealing Christmas, he wants to capture the love that he never had, thinking that it would make him feel whole. Even if there was some similarities to the original Jim Carrey movie, I don't see that being a problem. Especially when David Howard Thornton's performance actually is slightly similar to that of Jim Carrey, which is a-okay with me. I am okay with that. So 20 years later, after this traumatic experience, after being told that she was crazy, after no one believed her that a green monster came to kill her mom, her and her dad returned to Newville to celebrate Christmas. But it doesn't make any sense. If you had such a traumatic experience to the point where you had to move, why return to the place that caused you so much pain, especially when there's no one there to celebrate with? They have no aunts, no uncles, no cousins, no grandparents, no brothers or sisters or nothing. So why come back to this one place that also doesn't celebrate Christmas? The dad mentions that he couldn't find any Christmas decorations in any shop in town. And then the sheriff says, oh, well, no one celebrates Christmas here. And also the sheriff's up to some shit and it's fucking stupid. Also, we never meet any of these people. And for some, when they first appear, there's this awkward musical sting that is supposed to imply that we're supposed to either be afraid of them or that we know who they are, and it's unnerving and shocking that we're seeing them again.
Christmas decoration he can find.
But we don't know any of this stuff. The movie is just very incompetent to apply basic storytelling rules. It's kind of like that scene in Iron Man 2 where we're first introduced to Whiplash. Because at the time it made sense, because as an audience we had seen all the trailers, so when we see him we're like, oh my god, that's the bad guy. But that ages terribly because future generations are not going to watch the trailer before they see the movie. Like, who does that? Like, they're gonna be like, oh, hey, what's this on my dad's shelf? Let me just take a look at it. Or my mom's shelf for those badass future moms. So without having seen those trailers, that musical sting means nothing. After we meet this prick for the first time, we get a flashback of Cindy as a young girl detailing her encounter with the Grinch to the sheriff, and the sheriff just proceeds to gaslight her because he knows it's real. And yeah, of course he knows it's real. What do you like? So anyway, Cindy and her dad decide to decorate their house. It looks like they have enough decorations. Why would the dad need to go out of the shops? I don't know. To be fair, maybe he wanted to see if there was new ornaments or something. I don't know. But the festivities don't last long, as when Cindy steps out for a second, comes back, and her dad gets mauled by the Grinch and is killed, and then she wakes up in the hospital, and at first it looked like it was a dream. I actually thought she woke up in a mental hospital, and everything that we saw beforehand never happened, to imply that her first encounter with the Grinch actually gave her severe PTSD that she hasn't fully recovered, and she is plagued with nightmares of encountering with the Grinch again, and that she never left the mental hospital. But it actually happened after her dad was murdered, it just cuts to her waking up in the hospital. But then she looks at her hands and I'm like, what am I looking at? Is there supposed to be blood? What the fuck's going on? Like, there's some slight red light around her fingers, so I'm thinking, is this supposed to indicate blood? But then why wouldn't the nurses and doctors clean up the blood? It just didn't make any sense. And that's the problem with the editing and the structure of this movie, is it makes it so confusing as to what's going on. Or I could argue that this scene is a perfect encapsulation of bad writing and bad direction, but I would argue it's also a great example of bad editing, because this whole thing could have been taken out, therefore making the movie tighter and have it narratively make sense. Sometimes when you're writing a scene, it could seem like a good idea until you actually shoot it. Kind of like this deleted scene in Avengers Endgame, when after the death of Iron Man, everyone just starts kneeling. It's so lame. The editing is god awful. Like, the way that she just falls on top of her dad, it looked like she just phased through the door. And again, it's like everything's happening so fast that you can't make out what's going on, and therefore it's not scary. It's more confusing, if anything. And then for her to just scream and then just wake up screaming, it's like, okay, well, you made it look like that what we just saw didn't happen. Like, she just woke up from a dream. So she gets interviewed the next day about what happened, and no one believes her, of course. I'm kind of surprised that she isn't a prime suspect, considering how she was alone with her dad and her dad gets murdered. I guess they kind of figure out it wasn't her, considering how there was a burglary and how the Grinch just like basically flashed everything out of there. Like, all the Christmas decorations. Like, I know the Grinch is fast, but he's not as fast as the Flash. And after being overwhelmed trying to convince people that what happened was real, she passes out. So after burying her father, going back home, she finds a clue? Like a flower that just happens to be lying down where she was like trying to scrape off her father's blood. I'm so like lost. And this ultimately leads her to go on the website of Newville that encourages tourists to come visit the mountains. Or maybe she already knew that this is a Loopaloo flower and that it came from the mountains, and that this whole like weird ass website is just for the audience to tell us where she's going next. But it just feels like a really big leap. I don't buy that she just turns into Sherlock Holmes, sees a flower, and then just like, oh, this is where the Grinch is. Like, no person would make that logical step. You could have just had her be a photographer, like set that up earlier on in the movie, and then for her to just try and like get her mind off of this whole experience, she decides to go hiking and take photographs. It's like the most basic shit you can do to move the plot forward. The movie's so bad that I just constantly nitpick every little thing. The acting, like I said, is abysmal. Even this one shot where Cindy is like just taking a break from hiking and trying to like get some cocoa, whatever is in that thermos, she just like overdoes. It's like, you don't have to act every fucking thing. Just actually drink whatever the fuck is in that fucking thermos. Like, she just overdoes. She's like, oh, it's so good. Like, it's so unnatural and so fake. You're not watching people live their lives. You're watching actors, and I use that very loosely, get paid for making a movie.
Her mother was killed. Her mind snapped. I heard she spent some time in hospital.
Really?
So as she's taking some pictures, she accidentally gets a glimpse of the Grinch, and then she falls backwards and into the cave, but the way it was edited made it look like she just fades into another dimension. She didn't look like she fell like 10 feet on the ground or like into this like hill into this cave. That looks like a pretty big fall, like, or big tumble. Again, the way it's edited made it look like she just fell backwards and that was it. Not that she fucking tumbled down a small hill into a fucking cave and finding potentially the Grinch's hideout. Well, obviously she did, because she finds a wallet with an ID in it, which was so incredibly fake looking. So this implies that there was a victim that went missing in the mountains because of the Grinch. But she doesn't seem fazed by it. She's like, oh, whatever. And she just goes, finds a couple, unaware that the Grinch would show up and maul this couple to death. She runs in their defense to try to get the Grinch away from them, but it was too late. And I'm just like, you could have taken pictures of this as you were trying to go help out, or even when it was too late. She conveniently didn't have her camera. She just drop it? Like, oh my god, the best thing you could have done is either saved the couple, or at the very least could have taken a picture to help your case. So anyway, so she throws rocks at him, trying to scare him away.
You're real! You're real! You're real! You're real! You're real!
This isn't even so bad it's good. It's not even like good bad. It's just awful. Ambulance is being called as well as the police. There is a survivor, and conveniently she didn't see the monster because her glasses fell. What is she, Velma's sister?
But you saw the monster, right?
There's a monster?
And of course, the sheriff shows up, more gaslighting ensues, and it just gets so tiresome. Like, oh my god, there is no monster, you're crazy. So from the one picture that she accidentally took of the Grinch, she tries to post it all over town, and it's like, you really think that's gonna help your case, you stupid bitch? Afterwards, a group of douchebags, sounds about right, come to visit the town of Newville for a Christmas celebration and stop by a local diner. But it's like midday, and for some reason there's no cook or chef around, and so the only thing that the waitress can give them is iced tea. Oh, what the fuck? I don't understand. Like, it's one thing if this was like Christmas Day and so like everyone's off, but like this is before Christmas, so what the fuck? Who's working this diner?
Do you want your iced tea sweet?
Oh, how about regular? I got a feeling if you lick the ice cube, it'll be sweet up, boys!
What the fuck does that mean? I have a strong feeling that it wasn't the script, but rather a piss-poor attempt at ad-libbing. I'm surprised with how rowdy and disrespectful these fuckers have been. Kick them out. This is a justified cause to call the police and have them escorted out.
I think I'll take an iced tea.
If that wasn't bad enough, she goes into the kitchen to make their iced tea, and he fucking comes back. This dude who like touched her, like slapped her ass, comes into the back into the kitchen. And so rightfully she elbows him in the face. I'm like, after that, like, okay, done, over, calling the police, that's it. But after that, like, somehow the Grinch actually, like, nabbed him in, like, 2 seconds. Like, it's not funny how fast this fucker is. Like, oh my god, that was, like, lightning fast. Like, what am I watching, Brightburn? That was a better movie, god damn. I mean, I did like that he spared the waitress, like, locking her in the freezer until he was done massacring these obnoxious, abysmal, like, cannon fodder. But what really puzzles me is the fact that, like, even though there's, like, a shit ton of them, oh my god, they don't even think to like pin him down. I mean, like, most of them are like big ass dudes. Like, why don't they just pin him down and try to fight him?
Are you looking for trouble? Oh, I'm looking for trouble. Anybody else? Huh?
Well, there's 3 of us, so And this is what I talk about, how like there's no creativity in terms of like the Grinch lore. The fact that like what we know about the Grinch is he's freakishly strong. Why don't they use it to his advantage? Then it would make more sense for everyone to run away because they are incapable of fighting him. And the fact that they're just like constantly running around for the Grinch to like pick him off in the most unsatisfying way, it just doesn't make any sense. They outnumber him. Why don't they try to fight him? Like, oh my god, the odds are in your favor. Say what you want about Halloween Kills, but at least some of the townspeople tried to kill Michael. It didn't work because Michael is Michael.